Hi and welcome back to the next video, or in this case the new series, or with just one video, which is about Nest.js, hot reload and debugging with Docker-compose. And you can see it already in the background. We have like a single Docker-compose file that spins up all our services that we need. This are, for example, our Nest.js backend and our database, our Postgres database that gets connected to each other. And we have like hot reloading, so it watches for file changes and then reloads. Or we can also attach a debugger as you see it in the background. We can now shortly go through the concept of the series again. So with every series here, we clone or fork the last project so that our code is always up to date with the according project. So you can see it here. We started with a Nest.js Dockerized project where we made a new Nest.js project. So it's a clone or fork of none. We have a repository link, the YouTube playlist link for this videos. Then we added some JWT authentication, and this cloned or forked the first project, the code. And now here in our third project where we are, so local development with Docker-compose with hot reload and debugging, is a fork or a clone of our second project, so that we have all the stuff that we made here and here in our code as a starting base, and then we just add the code for this series. So let's go through the structure. So first we have a look at the video outcome, then we read the user story for this outcome, then we implement the user story and close it. So before we start, let's have a short look at the outcome of this video. So you can see here, when we hit the command docker-compose up later, we have our Postgres database spin up, so all our services that we need, and our API service, so our Nest.js application. And you can see it here, everything starts correctly, and we have attached our debugger, so we can start this here, the debugger. And then, for example, when we hit our hello world endpoint, then you see it's loading, and we are going directly into our debugging stuff. And we can then, if we go through it, we have hello world. And for example, if we change the hello world to hello YouTube, then you can see here we have detected a file change. This gets reflected into our Docker container, Docker image. And now it's building the stuff again. So this needs a little bit of time. Now you can see it here. We have to wait till it's available, our application again. And then if we hit this endpoint again, you see it's loading. We are hitting our breakpoint and we can go through it. And now it returns hello YouTube. So we have like a hot reloading stuff, and we can also debug it. So let's just quickly go through the concept of the series. So with every series, we clone or fork the last project so that the code is always up to date with the according project. So for example, the first project was to create the Nest.js application, the basic one, and Dockerize it. So this was a clone or fork of none project before. So we created everything. We have our repository link of the final code, and we have a link to the YouTube playlist where we have all the videos for this project here. The second one was to add JWT authentication to the Nest.js project. And here we clone or fork the final code of this repository here. So you see it here, clone fork of the first project. And then we added everything we developed on top of it, so that it's still also startable with Docker-compose. And here you also have the repository link and your YouTube playlist link for all the videos for this part. And now in the third part, we will add this later to the Readme, and we will now do everything that we can make local development with Docker-compose, with hot reloading and debugging. And at the end, we update this Readme here. So before we start with developing and reading the user story, we will first go through the code what we did in the last series so far. So for example, we can see it here. We are now on branch develop here. And we have just modified or created the user story file that we will read through in a second. And we modified the README file. So we will fix this up later. And in our code so far, we have like a Postman collection with all the requests that are available right now that we made in the last series. Then we are having like a user controller where we have endpoints to create a user to log in with password and email. And we get in return a valid JWT token. And we also have a request against the API/users to make a GET request. which is protected by the auth guard that should only return something or the users if we add a valid JWT token from our login to our request. So we can check this later at the end that everything is working. And so now we also have on top the Dockerfile that is getting the node in version 12. We have a working directory. We copy package.json and install everything. Then we build all our nest.js stuff, and then we run our main file. And then we have our docker-compose file where we start our nest.js API from the Dockerfile context. We connect to our Postgres database, which is started here. And we also have a Postgres adminer tool. So if you're interested in how we did all this stuff, you can go through to the second part or first part of the series where this all is explained. And now we can start with reading the user story for this video here. So this video here, or the series here, so part 3, will all be how to make a proper local development environment with Nest.js. And for this, we will use Docker-compose. And we also want hot reloading, and we want to be able to debug. And so the story is, as a developer, I want to be able to start everything with the Docker-compose up command, so that all external dependencies like databases are available, automatically spin up, and we connect to them. So as you remember, as you have seen here before in our Docker-compose file, we already in the first series, I think, added the Postgres dependency, and we also are already connecting in our app.module against the database. So we just now have to focus on make everything on the hot reloading stuff and the debugging stuff with Docker-compose, so that we can develop here everything and it's running. So hot reload is basically when a file changes, we should reload, or nodemon should realize that the file changed and should compile again, and so that we can directly reflect the changes. So the acceptance criteria are: we want to have a hot reload when some file change. We want to start everything with the command docker-compose up, so that we don't have to do spin up a database separately and so on. But this is, like I said, already done like in the first part of the series. We also want to do, or we want to be able to debug everything. And we want to check at the end with Postman that all requests are working. And if we add a breakpoint here in our code, then the debugger should also trigger if we hit this endpoint. So this is basically our story, and now we can start by developing everything. So the first thing that we need or want to do is we want to make a proper Dockerfile so that we can start everything. And probably we should add some stuff at the top and say important to read, of course. So if you're just hitting this Dockerfile here or starting this Dockerfile, this can never work, because as you see here in our app.module, we rely on processes and variables, so database, URL, and so on, that are only specified at the moment in our Docker-compose here. So if you're just running the Dockerfile, you will get an error that says missing, for example, the URL for your database, or in your auth module, I think it's missing the JWT secret, and so on. So we have to say, for example, since we rely in our code to environment variables for, let's say, database connection, DB connection, this can only be run successfully with Docker-compose. So just to make sure. And then with this here, if you have any questions what this stuff is doing, I will always add a command at the top what this command does, and I will explain it. And also, if you're further interested, you can always go to the first series to understand how everything here works. So as first, we want to, let's say, we can say specify the node version that we want to use, or the image version. And these are all available in Docker Hub. So for example, you can Google Docker Hub Node.js, and then you can look for all the versions that you want to or that you can use. And also, if you have the right extension for Visual Studio Code, you can just hit Steuerung and space, and then it says what is available. So, for example, we can use the latest long-term version of Node, version 14, and we can say we want to choose the image. And then this here is like a multi-stage build, so we can name all our stages. So we want to name our image as development, for example, and this can be anything, whatever you like. So we say we want to name this as development, this stage, the first stage here. So we can always refer to this stage here as development. Then the second thing that we are doing here is we specify a directory, Thomas source app, in our container where we are now. So we can probably rename this a bit to say specify our working directory. So this is where we are now. So if we execute here a command, for example, the npm install, this will happen inside our image in our Thomas source app folder. Then we want to copy all our dependencies. So we say we want, for example, copy the package JSONs from our host machine, so from my computer to the container. And with the wildcard, we can get the package JSON and also the package log JSON. And you can see it here. We are copying this from our local machine, so from our host machine here. So you see we are here in this folder, so they are on the same level. And we are copying this inside our image to our path that we are in on our working directory, so Thomas source app. Then after this, we can just hit npm install, and we can say here we install all the dependencies. Can remove this probably. And then we can bundle our app source, and then we just copy from here to there, so from our host machine to our Docker image. So we can say bundle app source or copy all other files. So we copy all our other files that are here to our machine, and then we can hit npm run build, and this will build the app to the what's it called, dist folder. And so this should be everything that we need for our build here. And here later we can probably do the production build. So let's just make it clear where we are. And for this production build, we can also use node 14, and we just say this time we don't name it development, but we name it production. Production. Then we could set, for example, or we can just name it. So we say here, build another image named production. And then we can set our node end variables to production, set node end to prod. And this could be, for example, our node end is production, and our environment variable node end is our node env. So yes. And the next thing is we also have to set our working directory. So we say set working directory. So this is work dir, and then we are the same path as here. So we can just copy it. And then we copy all our stuff from our development stage. Copy all from dev stage, development stage. And here we can say copy. And then we go against from, and here you see from stage. And we want to copy from our development stage. And we copy to our Thomas source app directory to our current directory. Then we can say, or we can leave our expose 8080 at the port, and then we can run the app. So this runs our main file, and as you remember in nest.js, main file will start everything up. And then we can, for example, try to execute our commands that we need to just check that this Dockerfile is valid and running. So let's say example commands to build and run the Dockerfile. This would be, the first command could be docker build. Then we say the name, let's just say Thomas minus nest. And the second one, we want to run the container or the image. So we say Thomas minus nest. And now we can try and check if this works. So first we build everything. I think we need here a dot. Yes. And now this will build everything. You can see it's going through our stages. So copy, run npm, run build. And here you see we are in development stage. So here at the moment, npm run build. Just give it some time. And then it will go into the production build, and we'll just copy all the sources that were, or everything from the first build. And then if we later start the image, it should probably fail because there are no environment variables in this Dockerfile. So it will not find, for example, this kwt secret or this, where is it? Database URL. So we can, while this go a bit through the code. And here, for example, we want to create a user. We have create user DTO. And we are extending here the login user DTO. So if we want to create a user, we need a name. And we also need the email and password. So let's wait. And now you see the install was finished. Then it copied everything. And now the npm run build is still running. 111 seconds. Takes quite long. So now you see we are here now in production step, where we are copying all the stuff. Now it's making the last things, and I think this should be quite fast. And now we could try to start our image. So now we say docker run and we specify the image name that we gave it before. And now this should probably fail because it's missing some environment variables. So you see here requires a secret or key. So this is exactly our the missing values, environment variables here. So but you can see before everything works correctly. So now we can go to our docker-compose file and try to adapt this so that this works correctly with hot reload. And this is, I would say quite easily what we can do here. So first probably we can fix the indentation. So this takes a little bit of time. So I will just fix this. And we can also remove this here. Makes it easier to read. That's the same everywhere. So we can fix the indentation here too. And remove these. And we can fix it here. And now you can see here Postgres and Postgres adminer. So this is our database. We are already connecting to it. And we have here our Postgres adminer where we can, for example, go against the database and run some SQL queries and see everything. And the connection here is from our nest.js API. So I just named the service here API. And this is how we can communicate with it. We have our database URL, which is having all the stuff from our Postgres service. And this is injected into our app module where we connect to the database. So the connection is already working, so we don't have to do anything here at Postgres or the Postgres adminer. So this works as expected. You can see it in the last series. And here we just have to modify our API. So to start here, we are building from our Dockerfile, which is here on the same path. And we have like our context. And then we could specify what we want to target in this Dockerfile. So you can see here in our Dockerfile, we are having the development stage and the production stage. And here we want only to meet the development stage because here we are just building everything. And if in the production stage, we are running it with this main, so we run the main file. And this is not listening for hot reload. You can see this also here in our package.json. If we would start the start def, then we started with the watch. And this will, for example, start something like node-mon, which watches our files. And if anything changes, it recompiles. So we can say here we want to have target. And this is our development stage. So we just want to use, or we just want to build this. So if you want later to run it in production, you have to change this, of course. So we can make a comment here also just to explain. So we only will build development stage from our Dockerfile. Then, of course, we depend on the Postgres service because we can only start if the Postgres database is set up or is set up. We have our environment variables, everything fine. And then we just want to add some volumes, and this is what makes the trick here. Because in our Dockerfile, we are copying all the files to our image, and then we run it. But this is not reflecting any changes that we make here. So what we need to do is we have to mount our host directory, so this here, to our container directory, so in our Docker. And so if we change a file here, the file chains get reflected to there. So then there the nodemon or the watches, and it's getting a hot reload, and yeah, everything works as expected. So we want to mount the current directory to our Thomas source app, and this here, Thomas. So first here we have here our current directory, and then we mount this to our Thomas source app, and this is the same as we specify it here in our Dockerfile and it here in our working directory, so that we are mounting it correctly. And we can mount, for example, a second, the how is it called, the node modules folder. So we can say / Thomas source app node modules, and here we can also describe it a bit, and we can say mount our host directory to the Docker container mount, and here we can probably add the dot so that it's clear that this here is our current directory to the Docker container Thomas source app, and we want to be able then to reflect, or with this we can reflect file changes from our host to container, to our container. And then we can also add a command, because as you remember, we are just targeting the development stage in our Dockerfile, and here we are not starting anything. Just in production we are starting our main file with Node, but here we want to execute another command, and this should be our npm run start dev command, because as you see here, this command start dev will start nest with watch, so it watches for file changes and then makes a hot reload. So we want to execute this command when everything is built, and then we can go on. We have depends on with our environment variables, and we have our ports, and now we will just first check if this is working, and if this is working we will also add some stuff to make it to be able to debug everything. So if we go now to our terminal, we can say make a dokcer-compose build, and now we build all the stuff here. So this can take a while, then we will start it, and then if everything starts correctly, we can check here with Postman. I have prepared some requests, so for example, to get make get to the users and check that we can only access the get request with our valid JWT. As you remember, here in our user controller, this here is protected by the JWT aufgabe, so you need a valid JWT, or that we are able with Postman to add a new user, for example myself, and give it a simple password. Then we could, for example, log in, get the JWT and make a request here again, and then it should return us everything. So let's make sure that everything is working. So now for the first time we always have to wait a bit longer. So now we have built everything up, and now we can just start it with dokcer-compose up. Now it first has to pull all the images that we are missing, for example, Postgres image, and then probably also our dokcer-compose. What do we have? The Postgres admin image, and so on. This can take, I think some seconds, minutes. Let's wait. Yeah, while this is still going on, we can, for example, start to edit the Readme. Or okay, it's nearly finished. So it's just downloading now the Postgres app miner, and this could be or should be quite fast. And then we can start everything, or it's starting. So what we can also see is on our main app controller, we have a app service get-hello, which returns hello world. And so this here should be where the request is /API, because in our main TS file, we set the API prefix. And now you see it's starting everything. So let's see, or it's creating everything. And then we should get here for this request the hello world answer. And here we can just execute our normal request against our user API and test it. So you can see here, now we are starting our compilation in watch mode. So exactly like we specified in our Docker-compose file with npm run start dev. And this runs our command in package.json nest start watch. And you can see before here, it started with Postgres, it started the Postgres app miner, and now you can see here, it compiled all the nest.js stuff, and started it. And now we can test all our requests. So you can see here we have a hello world. This goes fine. And for example, let's see if we go into our app controller, in our app service, and we change this here, hello, to hello YouTube, and we save this file. Then you see we are getting here some, it's watch for file changes. You can see it, I think, there, file change detected, incremental compilation, and now we are back live. And so now it should not return hello world, but hello YouTube, and the service works correctly. And now we can check all the other API endpoints. So here we should get like an error or access forbidden because we're not having a valid JWT. And you see we are unauthorized, so this is correct. So we are getting 401 or unauthorized. Here we could create a user where we just specify it here. So now we have created a new user, and I could, for example, and here we could just log in where we go against our request. So we have to go port 8080, and then our email is like we added it here. Insert this, and password is password, I think. Yes, here password. Then we could try to log in. We are getting a JWT in return. And if we make the request against our users, which you remember is here a protected request with use guards, and we check for the JWT, then we are not getting anything. But if we add our authorization, so our token here, then you see we are getting return all the users. At the moment, it's just the one that I created. So this works quite nice. And now the next thing that we want to add is we want to be able to debug everything. So for be able to debug, we are letting the debugger run on another port. So this basic port is 9229. And we can just say this here, debugging is the debugging port. And if we want to run the debugger, we have to run our debug command also, not the start dev. So you can see it here in the package JSON. We want to run the debug command. And I prepared something here. So here we would listen for this port and watch it. And then here we have to say we want to not run the def, but we want to run the debug command so that we start the debugger. And we have to add here run in debug mode, npm run start debug, run in dev mode, npm run start dev. Don't forget to start your VsCode debugger. So now we have added here the debug, and we also need to create a launch.json file for our Visual Studio Code so it knows how to debug everything. So we can simply go to this file here, and we can create a launch.json file with for Node.js, and this will create it here in our folder, a new Visual Studio Code folder with a launch.json file. And I prepared something that is based on this, or I get it from the internet, to be honest. And here we have our node, we attach it, we just call it debug Thomas nest.js app. We have our remote root, and this is important. This needs to be the path where we are working in our Docker. So here we have Thomas source app, and this is also our launch.json. We are here in our workspace folder inspector. This is the same port as we specified it in our package.json and in our Docker-compose here. And we want to restart it, our address, and so on. So this matches all. So when we have this, for example, we can now try to run it all in debug mode. So we can say docker-compose up. And now, as you remember, we are using not the command start dev, but start debug here. And we also have to, like I said here, start your Visual Studio Code debugger. So you can here choose, and this is like I named it, Thomas nest.js. So I want to start it here, click on the button, and then we have to wait. So probably we first have to wait till Docker is running. Give it some time. So you can see here, it's debugger is listening, and it's now starting with stuff here. It takes some time, so start it. We can now try to run the debugger again. And now you see we have a debugger attached here. And we can also disconnect or reload or whatever. And if we, for example, go now to our, let's say, to one of our endpoints, for example, our user controller, we want to make breakpoint here. Then we try to get the users. When you see sending request, it's popping up here, and we are in our debugger. So we have here our incoming stuff in our user controller. We could go into our find all and so on. So for example, when we debug it here, we can go to the next, then we land here and so on. Or to make it better, we can, or to see it better for you, we could, for example, go into our create service and try to create a user. If we have the same email, then this should, for example, you see we land here in our post endpoint where we create a user, and then we want to check if an email already exists in our database. So you can see here we hash our password, we save it, and so on. And first we go to mail exists, and this is here, checking if we have a result for the user. So let's see when we make a breakpoint here. Then you see we are getting, where are we? There and there. We get a user in return. And this means it exists, so it says our email already in use. And now, for example, if we go to our, just to make it easy, to our hello world stuff, so we can add a breakpoint here. If we then go to our page and load, when you see it's loading, we are running in our debugger, hello world, changes, and now we have here hello YouTube. And if we change it back to hello world and save it, then you see it's recompiling, watching file changes, file change detected, and so on, debugger attached. Now we can try to get it again. Now you see, missing? Not starting, so. Then we go again, and now you see we directly go into this breakpoint. If we go through it, then we have here again hello world. So now we can disconnect everything, and I will change this here to here, dokcer-compose and npm run start dev again. And yeah, you have here all the commands that you need and all the stuff. So at the end, now let's go through our user story again. So we have here to check our acceptance criteria. So hot reload when file changes, so this works. We can start everything with our docker-compose up command. We can also start with debugging, and we checked all our Postman requests that they are working. So we can now remove the user story, and we can update our Readme. So like our third project is like nest.js, local development with Docker-compose, hot reload, and debugging. So this is like a long name, but I think we can't go any shorter here to make it clear. So this here is a clone or fork of our second project. And then we just added our new stuff on top of it. Then we have our repository link that I will add later. And we have also our YouTube playlist, or in this case, it's just one simple video link that I will link also later. So now we can commit all our changes. So we can say git add upper A, and we say git commit with a message, and we say nest.js how do we call it, local development, and we can say in the command or in the commit, for example, added hot reloading and also debugging with dokcer-compose. So we can see we have changed all our files and we added the new ones. So we can now say we want to merge this back into our master branch. Where are we? Yeah, so I can do this later. And so this is here finished. Thanks for watching.